This is Lindsey O'Donnell-Welch with Decipher, and I am here today with a very special guest, Merritt Baer. Merritt, thanks so much for coming on today.
Hi, Lindsay. It's good to be here. I am coming in from Denver, where I am on Apache, Ute, Cheyenne, Comanche, and Arapaho land, among others. Really excited for a conversation today and to learn a little more about you, too.
Yeah, love it. And yeah, I'm also very excited, especially because you're very well known in the industry. And for those who don't know Merritt, she's a field CISO at Lacework and previously served at AWS in the office of the CISO. So really has that CISO expertise, but then also security experience previously in the private and public sectors. So a wide range of experience as a security practitioner.
Yeah, exactly. I have worked in both public and private contexts. I've worked in all three branches of US government doing security work, and then obviously AWS and now Lacework. I think, the one of the distinguishing factors of my roles has been that it's really in a position where I'm hoping to help kind of elevate that field, where it's not just concerned with my own organization's security, but also taking the lessons that we learn, being able to hopefully, elevate other folks and just raise the water level by helping folks understand sort of traits of highly successful security teams.
Yeah, I love that. It's so important right now too for security teams to understand what works and what doesn't. And I think that a lot of that is something that we're still feeling out, but by now we do have that baseline of kind of what you need across the board.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so
I mean, on the one hand, there's no like magic formula. On the other hand, we know that certain things work better than others and that good intentions are not enough. And you have to programatize and kind of mechanize your ways of getting good outcomes. And so I think the point is like, we don't each need to learn it individually to know that certain things work better, and taking advantage of some of the kind of innovation space that either is in the security realm itself or that lends itself over.
yeah, that's so true. And, I'm sure you having worked across different agencies in the government, but then also in the private sector, you have that kind of full range of insights into how that works at an operational level, at a strategic level. So it's a good insight to have for sure. Um,
Well, I try.
yeah.
My best today.
Yeah. So as part of this podcast series, we're really hoping to talk to the top experts within the cybersecurity industry and ask them the same 12 questions every week. And obviously the answers are going to range. I'm really excited to see kind of where this goes. But Merritt, let's start here with question number one. When did you get your first computer?
This is gonna make me sound old, but I like remember growing up having a shared family computer. I have three brothers, and I remember, having to fight for computer time among all of us, including my parents. And having to dial up for the internet and everything. So the first computer that I got was mine. Was going to college. And one of my cousins, I have five boy cousins. It's like a very uh, uh, movie show kind of set up here. But when I went off to college, one of my cousins runs a pawn shop in Appleton, Wisconsin. And so I remember that we had gotten, whatever early stage laptop from his pawn shop. And that was my first personal computer.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I can definitely relate to the shared family computer experience.
Where
I
you're like, go away,
Yep,
Peter,
I
and
know.
write an email to my future
Yeah,
boyfriend. Yeah.
I too. We had like the family computer in the kitchen, and my sisters and I would alternate like going on MySpace versus playing Roller Coaster Tycoon or whatever we would do with that. So
Yeah.
um, it's
Yeah,
it's
in
funny.
fact, I remember getting my, like, college admissions notification via email, and it was the first year they had done it that way, and I
Oh yeah,
was basically like, "Can I even trust this? Because it's not a physical thing," you know?
yeah. Yeah, you had the, trust, kind of piece of cybersecurity ingrained in you from the start then. or lack
Maybe,
of
yeah, the skeptic in me, yeah, for sure.
yeah. Um, well, question number 2, following up on that, what was your first exposure to hacker culture? Because it's one thing to have kind of the computer aspect of things, but then actually diving into cybersecurity and hacker culture is a different piece of that.
So I think of hacker culture, especially with the word culture, like being more about the desire and will and kind of predilection to take systems and pull them apart and make them work for people who aren't necessarily represented in the initial idea of who it was built for. Then
Mhm,
I do like hacker, being just like the hoodie and keyboard kind of trope. And
mhm,
so I think of, the like my exposure to hacker culture being like, you know, Rosa Parks or Muhammad Ali or American Indian movement, and learning about folks who had like taken existing systems and found ways to either point out kind of plaque rinses that needed to happen or to make them work for them in certain ways. And I think that for me, that's one reason why I ended up going to law school, was that I think that it's sort of like, jazz musicians who are classically trained, like you want to understand the systems themselves to understand how to kind of break them and fiddle with them. And I think even now, right, good security folks are not the folks who, or at least in my mind, good security folks are not the folks who are like, let's lock this down and make sure nothing bad ever happens. They're the ones who are like, what if I put a terabyte of data in the name field space?
mhm,
What would happen if? And they're also doing this not just to like, better prop up existing systems, but to make sure that those who can't afford to be insecure get better represented by their efforts. And so I
mhm,
think security, as part of that consideration of just like what matters in the world, was always apparent to me. I mean, like from just like the desire to do something that would matter in the world. And I think that, for me, this is a little bit of a winding answer. Sorry for not being more pointed, but
love
I
it.
don't have like a
Yeah.
moment of first exposure to hacker culture. I think
Mhm,
of that as like the kind of thing that you either kind of want to drive toward and continue to break things with and then build them back up better, or that you don't necessarily see the world that way. And so I think I got into that, or like felt this kinship with hacker culture when I realized that this is something that can serve that sort of desire to make our systems better.
I love that. Yeah, I think, and it sounds like you didn't have like a coming to Jesus moment or anything, but it was more like recognizing that these are, being able to think outside the box or being able to ask why is such an important piece of what makes up cybersecurity and kind of this so-called culture as well. So I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. And then, kind of piggybacking on that, actually, question number 3 is, when did you think you might make this a career? So, when did you really, you mentioned you went to law school. Like, when did you, at what point were you like, like cybersecurity, this really speaks to me. This is kind of what I would like to do now.
You know, um, Again, I will date myself a little, but I was in Mark Zuckerberg's year in undergrad at Harvard. And
Wow.
so I was put on the precursor to Facebook, which was Hot or Not, and
Yep.
then Facebook and whatever, without ever having chosen to be on the platforms. And meanwhile, we were kind of in the shadow of 9/11, and I felt like security was just like this range of issues that had to deal with, responsibility and government and private companies and citizen consumers, but that we weren't really prepared for that. And so I was really interested in it. But I will say that, like, even in law school, our career counselors we had to meet with, and they were like, "You're into this really niche area, like computer security. Are you sure you don't want to just like take some tax law courses?" And I think that so I wanted to do this because it was like the most interesting thing that I could think of that I could spend my life on. But then at the same time, I did question whether, I was just kind of not made for the like that I was going to have to go do a boring job that would just pay the bills. So I think the first, to answer your question about like the first time I thought I really could turn this into a career was when I moved to DC after law school. I clerked, which is like a nerdy prestigious thing, for the chief judge of the military Supreme Court. And when I was in DC, I realized that, security, especially working for the government, who of course does security as part of its core functions,
Yeah.
the security jobs were a possibility, that this could be a thing that I would actually turn into a career and not just be the thing that I wanted to read about and get good at, for myself and for other folks. So I think it was really kind of a like a process of me like I knew there was a there, but I didn't know if the rest of the world would see it. And even now, like, you look at job listings and there's increasing attention to the security space that is more of what I am, where it's like, technical and business perspectives and practitioner, but not like IT help desk and not data privacy attorney. Some of those like more paved roads, I think have been had to sort of um, give way to uh, more creative titles. I was going to say, you know what I mean? Because even
Yeah.
the chief information security officer title, that's not that long in the making. This wasn't a constant for the last, 15, 20 years. It's really come about more recently. And I think it's a good thing that we are starting to give more attention isn't the right word, but like to give more freedom to folks who are thinking about these problems and trying to really solve for them with this multidimensional approach where you care a lot about security, but you're also making business risk decisions.
Yeah, it's definitely like two sides of the coin there in terms of the risk you want to take, but then how much you care about security, as you said. And to your point too about the CISO role and so many other parts of cybersecurity are like the path has been paved, but so many people like it was fairly recently that a lot of this has been happening, and it's all so new that we're really as an industry trying to figure out the messaging and kind of the strategies and how we can relate to those at the C level, those who are who are security practitioners or IT professionals, and then at the way in there, like the end users, the everyday citizens who are using uh, iPhones, laptops, Apple Watches. So much of their lives are digital, but like trying to relate and be like, here's why you need to care about cybersecurity and here's what you need to do. It's such a big part of the industry.
Yeah, I think that's right. I also think though that like, what we're really talking about is the ability to have a true seat at the table for the security executive,
Hmm.
and to have that person be able to come to the table saying, here's what I know to be the risks. And the risks are not just breach. The risks are also like that we lose productivity, that the lights aren't, on, or that we aren't able to move as fast in our development cycles because we haven't moved to cloud, because we haven't embedded security into everything we do. Our time to recovery is too long because we're doing everything manually. There's these ways in which it is fundamental to the core business that your security executive lay out what's at stake here, right? But in order to do that, they need a seat at the table. And even today, a lot of CISOs don't report to the CEO. And I wish I could wave a magic wand and make that different, because I do think that it's important for CEOs to get, and boards and other overseers, to get access to the kinds of decision making, data that they need to. And it doesn't mean that you always side with the security person's agenda. It just means that you get to make an informed decision about the health of the business based on both business and security information. And I think that's the goal, is to make reasonable, well-founded decisions in this space. And as you point out, those decisions should and must take into account, the rights and well-being and business impacts on, downstream users, whether those are enterprises or end users.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. Being able to have that seat at the table. All right, I feel like I'm straying here from the question. Okay, question 4. What was your alternate career idea?
I don't know. I think that I figured I would just like go get a job. Like, I'm not scared of work, and I've bartended and worked in retail and, obviously taught and babysat and, started my own company. So I think I figured I will figure it out. And I was going to try to do the thing that I feel has the most impact, on some level, not to get too deep with you on a Tuesday morning here, but like,
Had my coffee.
but like, you're going to spend a significant portion of your life working,
Yeah,
and we don't get unlimited amounts of life, at least as far as I know right now. And so really part of what you're making a calculation about when you think about careers is like, what do I want to spend my one life on? And every hour, by the way, like, I think that there are some jobs that you kind of, can clock in and clock out, and others that you can't. And I figured that regardless, there's going to be hours where you could be learning Italian, you could be spending it with your family, you could be out, on a run, and there will be hours that you spend working that you could have spent otherwise. And so, like, what would be the most justifiable use of my sort of, you know, limited resources personally? And so I really kind of went into security in part like this or bust to find out, because I felt like it would be the most effective use of my one life. And even if I make incremental improvements that could both benefit, populations and communities that need better security as part of what they inherit from the world. And this is very tangible in terms of like the types of security inheritances that we get as individuals, but also that by nature of raising the water level for, large enterprises, even that, we're able to get, let's say, vaccines to market faster and more securely. We're
mhm,
able to provide, a point of sale that means that folks' identities aren't getting stolen frequently. That means that folks, like that. I think folks often forget that security is a deeply personal experience. And I think women remember it more frequently, to be
mm,
fair.
yeah,
But I think that, for me anyway, I was going to do this, or I was going to go get a job.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's it. That's a really good point about kind of limited resources. What do you want to do with that? And between for me personally, between work and then like personal life after and before work with kids, I think there's probably like one hour of my time where between you know
Seriously.
that
Yeah.
bedtime that I'm like, what do I want to do with that? Go on a run,
Yeah.
like read
And if you
more
can make
maybe.
your job be one of the things that you think matters in the world, I think that's a powerful thing. But I, at the same time, like, everyone's got to pay rent. So like, you go get a job if you need to go get a job. I wasn't convinced that this would work out. I just figured I would give it my best shot.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And then I do have one quick follow-up question, because you've mentioned this, before too. Is when you say raising the water level for security, can you talk a little bit more about what that means and how that relates to kind of where you're coming from?
Yeah, so I think in both small and larger ways. For example, if I can help a customer feel more emboldened to move to cloud, and it means that they are able to do more R&D, right? Because they're now using high compute that they wouldn't have otherwise had access to, because they are getting security assurances that they feel more comfortable with, because I was able to help them get to the point of understanding how to take, security indicators or posture management, or whatever it is that, that helps them to do more. And or if it is something even as incremental as like, putting MFA on everything, making sure your root credentials are protected, like things that then limit your exposure. I mean, the customer's exposure. That means that there are downstream effects. It means the enterprise can do more. So let's take the pharma company, or we can take any other, think of any industry out there. If they're able to be more innovative and more productive and more secure, then we all inherit a little better world. But then very literally too, if, on the personal level, as you alluded to, as an end user, if they're getting better protections at every step along the way. As you know, there's tons of supply chain intricacy that, folks are interacting with tons of different enterprises every day. If each step of that gets a little bit more secure, then each individual inherits a bit more security. And I think that's just a really unsexy but like landscape way that I think about how to do security, which isn't just like, oh, go buy identity protection or go whatever. It's more about creating a world in which everyone you know, I mean, like, receives better security from the enterprises and individuals they interact with.
Mhm. I love that. Yeah, because security is for businesses, it's overwhelming, especially for like SMBs, for, smaller businesses that might be, limited with their resources, with their personnel. So being able to just have that as like a measurable impact, I think is so important.
That's exactly right. And I think, everyone has limited resources and they want to make sure that they are spent meaningfully and that they're getting signal to noise, like that they're actually getting the security indicators they need, that their team is working on the right stuff. How do I know I'm focused on the right stuff is a big question. And I think, if I can help them both calibrate, like, what are you doing today? How do what's working and what can you be better at? What are your peers doing that's working? What have I learned as a security practitioner that I can help share that, that we had to learn the hard way, but I don't want everyone to. And frankly, to just like embolden and sort of motivate folks to take business steps in the direction that they need and never have security be the blocker. It doesn't
Mhm.
mean that security won't ever say no. We sometimes do, but we say, no, not like that. Like, let me help you get it to a good enough state that we know that we can protect it, right? So, security is part of the real business case for moving forward. And as you point out, everyone knows that what you get today includes the security of what you get. That's what
Mhm.
everyone,
Yeah.
like inherently kind of knows. But at the same time, I think making that business case really tangible helps enterprise leadership make decisions that are business forward with security awareness. I want to be a motivator for the business.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that's so true. And to your point about, not saying like we are like the no people, we're always saying no. Like I do think that's so true. Like being able to kind of switch gears and say, yes, we can do this if like cybersecurity, like these are implemented, or like if we have this solution in place, or this kind of change in how we operationally organize this. So
Yeah.
not just saying no, no, no,
Right.
like
We got to get to yes.
enabler.
And,
Yeah.
and we got to do it thoughtfully, and there are a lot of tools these days with the tech, from paved roads to, immutable and ephemeral environments that mean that folks can really weave their business goals in with their security considerations. It's not to say it's like one click and it's easy, but it's doable. And I want folks to feel empowered to do that. And I think that's the right thing for businesses and enterprises and for the public sector to be able to do more against their missions. But I also think it's the right thing for us as humans to like unleash ourselves from this kind of fear-based decision.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. All right. We're only in question 5 here, so I
All right,
gotta
let's go
move
through a
forward.
few so we don't keep everyone long.
Yeah. All right. Okay, question 5. Who was your hacker hero, or is?
So I think again, I don't think of hacker by a traditional definition where it has to be one of the famous folks, um, who happen to have a book written about them or something. But I think obviously Ada Lovelace is a kind of an endearing cultish figure despite dying super young. She happened to like change the face of what we think about with modern computing, where it was like
Yeah.
instead of just like a computation machine, she was now abstracting over to conceptual. And I think it's no surprise that she was the daughter of a poet, Lord Byron. And I think that like there's a lot of ways in which poetry and programming makes sense, both with like syntax and diction and the ability to execute well if they are written parenthetically in smart ways. But also, this idea that it hopefully kind of speaks to us, builds stuff that's better, like especially in a cloudy world, we're dealing with abstractions. We have kind of moved beyond the abacus version of a computer where we're just like checking to make sure our VM is plugged in. And we're actually moving to the point where we can reason about the things we're doing, where we are, using abstractions and then are able to do it at large volume and large scale and taking, I think, certainly the view of Lacework leadership that I have, um, you know, uh, observed and that I can participate in is the idea that data itself is your security tooling these days. And it's really no longer about just like hoping that your VMs are plugged in or that it's, John's job to go check them every Tuesday, but that you're actually dealing with these higher order problems and then able to, take every API call and still extract signal to noise. And so being able to get the right indicators to take action upon them, and like really thinking about compute in the current sense. I think Lovelace was ahead of her time, or maybe was like right in time to kind of set this stage.
Yeah, that's really funny you mentioned that because, back when I was getting, I was kind of more on the IT side of things. I was looking to get into cybersecurity and I was reading, I forget what book it was, but it mentioned Lovelace and that her dad was Lord Byron. And I thought that was really interesting because I was an English major too in college. So I was like, there could, potentially be a place where like kind of the creative arts is plays out in cybersecurity and in kind of the messaging and how that relates to it too. So I just thought that's funny that you say that because the book that I was reading also kind of mentioned that there needs to be, it's not just something that's technical. Like there's such a big impact on kind of across different industries as well.
Well, the
Which,
technical is abstracted now, right? You get to
yeah,
higher order math and it's all letters. So,
right. Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Down to
you
that.
know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, I think this insert the part where we tell everyone the water is warm and take whatever experience you have as a first grade teacher or an architect or a gardener, and come join us in the security field because who but us are going to, like, the emperor has no clothes here. We all had to just like get in and kind of start teaching ourselves stuff. But I also do think that, yeah, it's not, I don't think this is like that condescending people thing where it's like, oh, it's okay if you're not technical. I actually think it's sort of the opposite, where it's like, you may be more technical than you realize, than one realizes.
Yeah.
Because I think there's no pass go collect $200 for calling yourself technical. I think that folks who have thought in parameters and found ways to convey information and to make it larger than their individual thing they care about, like these are all the things that folks have worked on for a while. But yeah, I certainly see parallels between the kind of creativity that good security takes and then lots of other creative fields.
Yeah, definitely. There are for sure. So okay, let me question 6. What is your favorite hacker movie?
I don't know if I have a favorite hacker movie. I know there's all these like cult classics, but my favorite movie is Good Will Hunting. I feel like that's a little bit of a hacker movie, or at least like the higher order math stuff that we were talking about.
Yeah.
And I think it's, part of it is the idea, which I think is true in a lot of hacker movies, the idea that you're like kind of exposed to this idea that you're hanging out with a smart cast and that you like learn something during the movie. But most hacker movies are really like studies in personality. And I think that here too, right? The point is that you care about the folks and that you, even if you're totally different, that you relate. So yeah, that's my favorite.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because living in Boston, I definitely related with that too, just from a kind of an environment and landscape
Yeah.
perspective.
You don't
Yeah.
have to be
Love
like the genius who shows up at MIT and
that.
whiteboards on, at Moonlight to like kind of relate to just this dichotomy of worlds that he's living in and the desire to fall in love, but feeling really imperfect. And, like I think
Yeah.
there's, so like the good thing about good movies is that you rewatch them and see different things every time.
Yep. And a great cast too. So, um, all right. So, my next question is, how do you describe your job? I'm curious about this.
Yeah. uh, so my current job, and I am, let's see, a little over a month in at Lacework as a field CISO. I am the CISO who talks to customer CISOs, essentially. So there, I think, is, as we described, there's like an increasing, I don't know, reckoning happening within the security professional executive world. And at AWS, for example, I sat in AWS security, worked on our own security, but I was increasingly getting pulled into customer conversations, into helping translate regulatory or policy considerations, helping other, industry folks understand how we operate internally. And so taking all of those types of work that I was doing, it was interesting because ultimately I think there was a lot of demand is like not an imperfect word, but there was a lot of value in me spending time helping externalize what we're doing as a security team, not necessarily so that folks will go like buy AWS's product, but so that folks can understand how we approach it, how their peers are approaching it, as folks who sit in a kind of convener space in the landscape. And
Mhm.
so at Lacework, as a field CISO, I no longer have to like worry about, handing out employee laptops and other things that are more the internal IT considerations. We have an awesome person who works on that, Leah, but I get to translate to customers at the CISO level, like, what they care about, how I think about security practitioner issues, and of course, how they can learn from each other as peers, those kinds of conversations. And where it's relevant, obviously, we'll talk about what Lacework does as a company. We're a cloud security platform that helps folks to either, avoid or detect and then remediate security issues to build a security team in an intelligent and cost efficient way, and so on. But I think ultimately it's really about being the peer practitioner or security executive who can have a reasoned and a practical conversation, like have the empathetic conversation with other security pros out there, whether they're the more tactical or the more executive side, about what they care about today and how we can be useful to them.
Mhm.
So I'm not in sales. I don't have a sales goal or anything. I'm there to just help them understand how to think about some of these issues in the landscape.
Yeah, yeah, and collaboration and transparency are so important in the industry right now. So having that kind of, as you say, external facing role is, a great place to be.
Yeah, to be honest, I have done the internal facing and I know the like rewards and also the slog that it is to be captive to trouble ticketing all the time. Don't get me wrong, like everything is a trouble ticket for us too. Um, but I also think that ultimately there's a lot of value in, being able to, like you said, kind of convene those peers, allow them to talk to each other, but also to just be someone who gets it and hopefully helps, kind of solution with them the same way that folks do pair programming. It's like pair executive problem solving. So I get
Mhm.
calls from folks who are like, I'm trying to think about how to approach this migration. Do you have thoughts on like how you would do this
Yeah.
when, migrate one workload or 100? I've got mixed environments. How would you approach a source of truth and how you're going to, have metrics on success for response times? there's all these ways in which there's no like one answer. It depends on what you are working on and what your goals are, but it also like there are some solutions that have worked better than others in my
Mhm.
experience.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned kind of bringing value like that. For the next question, is what's your proudest moment? So that kind of dovetails into that a little bit. What would you say is your proudest moment in your career, like in your life? It's a
Okay.
loaded question, but
Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough one.
yeah.
I guess the cliche one would be that I have a 3-year-old daughter, and so she's pretty rad. But I think, there have been, I think at least for me, I was about to say the landscape of people's lives, but I'll just speak for myself. I think generally, most lives are not made up of these like remarkable turning point ish moments. At least maybe you look back and realize that maybe it was, but at the time, a lot of it is finding ways in which you can find like joy in smaller things, repeatable habits, for lack of a better word, that, mechanisms that work that you then realize you were able to contribute to. I'm not my name has to be on everything, but if I notice that things are working better because I was there and because I was able to offer value, like that makes me happy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, then, for the this next question here kind of is on the opposite end of things, but question 9 is what was your biggest mistake or like something that you learned from?
Oh man, I mean, not buying Bitcoin at $1 and selling it at 60K. I feel like I have had good like sort of instincts about where the landscape is going,
Mhm.
but I don't think it's like a big mistake, but I also am someone who like, I mean, if you had asked me 20 years ago whether a whatever it is, 164 character news site would actually have traction, I would have said no. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so like I
Yeah.
think I don't think of it as mistakes, but I'm always kind of taking stock of things that I could have anticipated better, or that like surprise me in that they work or something like that. Because I tend to
Yeah.
be more of an unsexy focused, just like uh, I'm not captive to the latest trend, but
Mhm.
sometimes the latest trends are important. And so I'm always kind of watching for the stuff that kind of filtering signal from noise in my own life, like figuring out the stuff that I should pay attention to. And I don't think it's like some big mistake, but in terms of thinking about what I work on, one of the things is like, where should I be more attentive to, however trendy it is, the thing that's currently captivating folks, even if it is just for the fact that it is captivating folks. So I'm always just kind of there to learn about
Mhm.
what I'm not seeing.
Yeah, yeah. No, that is important, and especially as a CISO, like when you look at kind of these the newest hot trend, the newest emerging technology. I think the ability to take a step back and say, first of all, is this something that is a trend or is it actually happening? And then second of all, like what does this mean from a security perspective, and why? Why should we like be caring? Why should we approach this in a certain way? Um,
Yeah,
so
exactly. I'm just kind of constantly refining that like barometer of BS.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that. Yep. um, okay, we're coming up on the final three here. Question 10 is, what is your best piece of security advice?
Oh man. Other than turning on MFA or something, Pat. So I think these days most folks consider security not as like a one time investment or as a one decision game. But I would love for folks to feel even more, and I guess I should say, I'm talking at the enterprise level. I would love for folks to be even more conscious, and by enterprise, I mean like this could be public sector too, but to be even more conscious of the costs of not moving. I was listening to a good podcast recently. I'm into podcasts called Havana Syndrome. That's about Havana Syndrome,
Mhm.
and which you know, folks can look up if they are curious. But essentially, they found that the targets of this, you know, whatever it ended up being, you know, a radio frequency attack or microwave or whatever, they were the folks who experienced the worst symptoms were the ones who just stayed in place.
Hmm.
And so there's a common military and dark world phrase, which is get off the X. Like
Mhm.
wherever you are, if you're currently getting targeted, move from the place you're currently at. And so I think there's like a security world parallel here where it's like, if you are staying in place, you are a target.
Mhm.
So get off the X, like move, you know, don't, a lot of times folks use security as a reason to stay in place, to not do the next step that they kind of need, they know they need to do. You know, but they use the sort of, uh, inactivity as a, you know, use security as as a justification for not doing some affirmative movement. And I think, you know, as a piece of security advice, like that's not a security forward decision.
Mhm.
You've already made a decision if you're staying in place, and it's
Mhm.
not the most secure thing to do.
Yeah, yeah, it's not a like one stop, you know, process where you can say, I did this, now I'm secure, because on the other end, like threat actors are also moving, and they're adapting, evolving.
Yeah, I mean, move with your business, right? Like you should be constantly getting better. You should be constantly embracing, you know, new technologies with thoughtful approaches. You should move to cloud. You should move to, you know, like you should take the next step that you kind of know you need to take, rather than thinking that by staying in place and kind of covering your head, you're
Mhm.
more secure.
Yeah. All right. Well, on the other side of the coin here, what's the worst piece of security advice you've heard?
um, oh gosh, that I've ever heard. I don't even know. There's a lot of bad security advice. Um, I don't love anyone who's out there saying like you must buy this product and then you'll be secure. I also think, you know, we're just coming off of the sort of conference season here. Folks who think that like taking a burner phone is going to be secure is not, you know, if you're logging into your own accounts and you're on a presumably older and less secure, inherently secure device,
Mhm.
FYI, like your, you know, your burner phone with you signed into all the accounts is just your device in a sundress. So just on a personal level, you know, don't do that, folks. It's silly.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. Like I said, I really think like my focus is at the large scale for like security misses, and which are really business misses in terms of thinking that they can't be secure, that they can't go forth and do the thing they need to do. And I think the idea that you can't move sensitive workloads into cloud, the idea that you can't do large scale migrations, the idea that you can't, you know, fill in the blank. Like I think the 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 most dangerous folks to an enterprise are the ones who are not finding ways to get to yes.
Yeah,
So,
that's so true. You hear like the phrase like security as a business enabler instead of a cost center, or like, and it kind of applies to that.
exactly.
No.
Yeah,
So
it's one that I've been saying for a long time. Yeah.
yeah, and it's hopefully people are, you know, starting to listen and understand that what that means more. So
Yeah.
um, okay, so well, you've been in the hot seat for 11 questions now. So now you get to flip the script here and ask me one question. What's one question you have for me?
Yeah, you know, so I will also say as an aside, like I am a huge fan of journalists and I think it's really important that we get good stories out there. And especially I feel like, you know, the security field is one of them, but there are a lot of fields in which this just matters a lot in terms of getting the right the right stories, or just getting folks to understand the landscape here. So I want to know, what's one story that has stuck with you that you're proud of or that you think is really poignant?
Yeah, yeah. It's tough in the cybersecurity world. I feel like there's like fires that happen like
It doesn't
every
have to be in the security
month.
world.
Yeah, it's true. I did start early on, like in general news, and then moved to more IT news, and before getting into cybersecurity. I will say, from the cybersecurity landscape, like I do think that the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack, like, was hard to watch play out, but then also really interesting to cover and better understand what that means for
Mhm.
critical infrastructure organizations, and really kind of how it was perceived by the general public as a whole. Because I think a lot of what I write about, I'm writing for security engineers or analysts or, people on security teams within organizations. But um, better understanding how the public perceives cybersecurity is something that I think, from a journalist perspective in cybersecurity, I think needs to be better kind of thought about, and looking at that perception, because
Yeah.
there was a lot of, if you went on to like GMA or some of the big like public morning shows, like how they covered that, I thought was really interesting. And then the other piece of that story too was just how it kind of provided a turning point for the US government in how they started to think about how security should be um, looked at from a public sector level. And I'm sure you've kind of been in the thick of it, on the public sector side as well. So I'm sure you have some thoughts there too. But I just
Yeah.
thought that was really an interesting incident and event to see, um,
Mhm.
and to
Yeah,
cover.
definitely a high watermark and sort of a juncture. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think, you know, we think of critical infrastructure in a lot of ways, but the part of it is that, like, it's got the lights have to stay on, So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
So my
Yep.
my
Um,
my dog is jingling her collar, which I'm going to trigger the Zoom rule, which means that you have to show them. So
yes, please
I'll do
do.
an
I need to.
outro with peanut butter.
Yeah. I love that.
If you heard scratching,
Oh.
sneezing, or collar jingling, this is the culprit.
So what's your dog's name?
Peanut butter. Say hi,
I
peanut
love that.
butter.
What kind
Here.
of dog is Peanut Butter?
Oh, she's an old rescue. Today
Oh.
is actually her birthday. Well, it's her adoption anniversary 11 years ago. But
Oh. It's funny you say that because I have a rescue too, and I heard him jiggling his collar outside. I think he went downstairs, so I can't grab him, but
the
you know
yeah,
what? There needs to be a dog that makes an appearance on every podcast going forward. That's
there we
my
go.
my
There we
decision.
go.
Well, Merritt, thank you so much for taking the time today, and it was really great learning more about kind of your background and how you view cybersecurity. And I had a really good chat.
Good. Yes. Happy to be here. Folks, you can find me on Twitter at Merritt Baer. And, feel free to reach out with comments and of course, any requests for Lacework demos if you want.
Absolutely. Yes. All right. Thanks again, Merritt.
All right. Thank you.